So, welcome everyone once again for our weekend retreat hosted by Ajahn Brahm Society Sri Lanka. So, um, yesterday we did a singular program, so today we are doing our usual English day. So, now it's the time to listen to some Dhamma. So, let us start with the talk with paying respects to Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, for today's talk, I thought to talk about one of these common problems we encounter in our meditation. It's about 5 hindrances. I think you all heard about the 5 hindrances and you have some idea what the 5 hindrances are. But nevertheless, I thought maybe it's a time for us to refresh our knowledge and our memory regarding these obstacles. So 5 hindrances are, we need to understand 5 hindrances in a certain context. Now, Lord Buddha talks about the Noble Eightfold Path, and the practical manifestation of Noble Eightfold Path can be seen in the gradual training. The gradual training you see in certain suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, places like Dantabhumi, Ganaka Moggallana, and a few other suttas also. You see this gradual training. In that training, you see that a person starts with sila first. In that suttas, it starts with the person decides to go forth and ordain as a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni, for that matter. And then they start with their training. So what we see in a more sort of broader context, even as lay people, Lord Buddha says that once you start keeping precepts, what should be the next step? It should be you should be start meditating, practicing 4 satipatthanas. So you see this pattern with details in this gradual training. So one starts with the sila and one being restrained in one's ways. That understanding that restraining is also an important thing if you are aspiring to develop your meditation, to find peace within yourself, because all these 5 sensual pleasures, they have their sort of a fun side to it. Lord Buddha doesn't deny it. Lord Buddha says that there is a fun side to it, but you always pay a price for that. These things come with a price tag. So when we are in that world, at least we need to understand that, we need to remember at least that we are paying a price. So the price is that these things cost certain mental energy. Although it is fun and sort of pleasurable, afterwards there is this sense of voidness, or you lose the clarity, and sometimes you sort of start regret even, and you fall behind of your sort of certain duties and responsibilities and things like that. I think we all have that sort of experience. It starts with the fun and games, and then uh, it usually doesn't last that long. But how the human behavior is, we sort of come back to the same thing. We keep forgetting the same thing, how these things ended up because of the lack of sati. So we find ourselves doing the same thing again and again. So that's how the samsara happens anyway. We keep forget. We never learn lessons. But as practitioners, we try to learn our lessons and try to remember that at least when you are in such a situation, these things actually eventually leads to that, that sort of a lack of energy, sense of sort of whiteness, and sometimes you won't actually, what's the point to all these things after a while. So there is this sort of a pleasure, sort of a pleasurable and sort of fun side to these things, and then comes the drawbacks. Hence this cycle, Yoga talks about the asada, adinava, and the nissarana. Asada is the positive side of it, the pros, or like the beauty, the good side to it. There is this asada, and then there is this adinava, which we translate as drawback or the danger, because these things come with such a price. Having seen that danger or the drawbacks, and then we start to contemplate, is there a way I can possibly avoid certain things? Maybe I should outgrow certain things and move on and find more meaningful things rather than just the pleasure and the fun. So asada, adina, and the nissarana, like the sarana, we know what the term sarana means, that you go refuge. Nissarana means the opposite of it. You don't find refuge in these things anymore. You don't believe in these things. Occasionally, you might go for it, but you're no longer infatuated and totally sort of immersed in these things. You know actually what this entails, and you go and you come back quickly. So Lord Buddha says that without going through this asada adinava, you don't see turning away from these things, the nissarana. So it's a natural process, it's a learning cycle. So every time you go through these things, if you are aware of this thing, if you remember what happened last time, how these things turned out to be last time, then there is a learning cycle always. The learning happens. Hence the maturity. Over the time, most of the people actually mature. They outgrow from these things. At least from certain things. So restraint is important. And even as lay people, even as lay practitioners, you should see that to a certain extent how beneficial it can be sometimes. Even to pursue your own goals as lay practitioners, like worldly goals even, maybe educational, professional, still a sense of restraint is somewhat very beneficial. Otherwise we are so scattered and our energy is lost, even to pursue our sort of a usual sort of goals, let alone the spiritual goals. So it is not some sort of a higher practice, it is not something very above us. We see the benefit, we have noticed it, we have sort of experienced certain times we have restraint, and we have seen you immediately feel proud about you and feel good about yourself, and you have that clarity. You can go about and do your business afterwards. So restraint also helpful, and then practice of mindfulness. I'm following this gradual training, that set of dhammas. You practice mindfulness. That means now you are clearly in the territory of meditation, and you are being mindful of your surroundings. In a day-to-day situation, you are aware of your surroundings, how you supposed to be conduct yourself, what should be the right thing to do, and things like that. Because the virtue is also at the back. You see yourself as this virtuous person, at least trying to be virtuous. You're training yourself. You're not perfect, but you try to do the right thing. Try to be like a kind human being, and you're trying your best. So if you see yourself like that, you find yourself being a virtuous person. You become that person. You keep 5 precepts or 8 precepts because you identify. You make an identity out of it, and at the beginning it is important. Because as monastics also, we build an identity, a huge identity. We change sort of our attire and everything, just to sort of solidify our identity, so that later on, that will be our platform, and later on, eventually, ultimately we give up that as well. After we became arahants. So to exit samsara, until then we stick to that identity, we stick to that platform, that institution. So in the same way, there has to be a certain form and certain ceremonies and certain identity. Otherwise, if it is just sort of in the air, sort of a loose sort of a thing, look, don't attach to your precepts, and the precepts also like some cultural thing, or how about secular Buddhism and things like that. It's just later inventions, basically. It's just this later philosophy and this Western political sort of ideas and things actually got mixed in the Buddhism, and then they're presented as some cool sort of a way of a take of Buddhism. That might sound cool, but it doesn't take you that long, that far, because you need to have a certain identity, because that's how it began. Upasaka, upasika. There is a certain identity behind it, and you define your boundaries with it, and you feel you have a sense of pride, and sort of you feel proud about yourself, and eventually you will tackle the problem of the self also. One famous meditation teacher, he was like a hermit, Ajahn from the Denmark. When he was asked, how should we understand the self, the non-self rather, his answer was, you need to understand the self first. The idea of self, because that's we are engulfed in. We feel that we exist and all these things, but we are not. But even that, we are not that clear actually how it happens, how this sense of self is made in thought processes and in the usual life. So we need to understand that first, and then you see, start to dismantle that idea eventually. The non-self will be understood. So that sense of sort of identity is important. Otherwise, things get too loose, and you start to sort of wander in the space, out there in the dark, without any sort of a support sometimes. Just kind of hang around out there. but the precepts and this whole sort of training and practice and the institution and the ceremonies and the rituals are there to sort of hold on to. You can hold on to that because that is something very solid and palpable at least. They are not always perfect, but because along the time, the tradition and everything, things get complicated sometimes, but still it is there for a reason. So, gradual training. So the person actually try to be mindful, and all these things mean keeping precepts and adhering to a certain form means that it requires mindfulness, and that is outside the formal practice. If you are in a formal practice like today, what you do today, like sitting down and doing walking meditation, then of course it requires mindfulness. So you practice your mindfulness, and then the satipatthana practice is at the background. You do practice satipatthana, and then you start to see there are these certain obstacles are coming because you have removed all the gross obstacles already, which are like, you have eliminated the bodily misconduct, you have eliminated the verbal misconduct. The bodily misconduct and the verbal misconduct means that breaking precepts. So once you try to keep the precepts, you are trying, it's a training, you're not perfect, but that sense of trying, that honesty, you're training, that's good enough, that's sufficient. That's how we sort of carry on until we, hit a milestone one day. So with that, you remove those coarse sort of akusala, the misconduct, and then once the grosser things have gone, now the finer things start to appear. Otherwise, everything in the same place, there's so much clutter, you don't sort of notice what is what. But once these coarser things are gone, then you start to notice, there are these 5 hindrances. Lord Buddha talks about 5 hindrances. They are there. You start to notice. And what are these 5 hindrances? Let me go through the 5 hindrances briefly at least. The first one is the Kama Chanda. Now it's usually translated as I think the word doesn't come to my mind, but so it is Kama Chanda. It is to do with the 5 senses. Now, the Ajahn Brahm uniquely translate Kama Chanda as you are giving chanda to the karma, the 5 sense pleasures. Now, chanda, we know in Sinhala also we give consent, we sort of vote towards something. Now, Kama Chanda doesn't mean that you are just exercising, you are being delighted in Kama Chanda, like this five sense pleasures and the 6th sense as well. It's not just that, but this act of this tendency, of this inclination of saying okay to them. It's okay, sense pleasures, it's okay. So you give a little consent to these things. Once these are sort of allowed to be in your mind, it will hinder your meditation, understandably, because you say yes to these things. And so that's the first hindrance, the karma chanda. And the second one is the vyapada, or the ill will. Now the ill will also, I think it's rather clear to us how the ill will happens. It's the anger, annoyance, and all the rest of that emotion. Now, the anger, it can be towards a person, it can be towards an object or a situation, towards oneself, or the meditation object even. This irritation. I think that doesn't need that much of an explanation what the ill will means. It's rather clear. And then comes the sloth and torpor. Thina, midda. So there are like two aspects to this thing. Thina, or the sloth, is like this. Your mind is rather in a more sort of a darker, more how to say, like any, you understand what the term sloth means. There is this lack of energy, closer to sort of a sleepiness, but it is not quite the sleepiness, but this lack of energy basically, that quite covers the thing. It kind of hinders you to sort of get up and engage with something. You would rather sort of sit inside the house, or sit on a chair or something like that. The lack of energy is there. That is sloth. And the torpor means that you start to nod. You sense this sleepiness. So the thina midda is that basically. It consists of these two. And it comes, and the next is the uddhacca kucca. That means the restlessness and the remorse. There also we see like two things mentioned there. The first thing is that as we experience most of the time, that the mind is not settled. Mind is, thinking things continuously, one after the other, without stopping. So there is this lack of contentment, and the mind wants to think continuously about things, and there's no end to it. And the remorse, as the term suggests, there is this sense of guilty and a sense of remorse over the certain things happen in your life, over your conduct, things you did do, didn't do, and things like that. That is also something obstruct your meditation. And as the fifth, there is this vicikicca, the doubt. And the doubt is also a very powerful hindrance. We see in certain cases that doubt is so much, how much they doubt themselves and doubt others. Because these days the doubt is so much sort of prevalent because it is encouraged. We have, we have this respect for the critical thinking, and this sort of like doubting things, because if you are not doubting things, sometimes you feel like you're gullible and you're exposed, and people might use you, exploit you, and things like that. So we are prone to this doubting habit. So that we protect ourselves, that's how we go about and sort of acquire knowledge and things like that. I think Lord Buddha doesn't discourage that sort of a critical thinking. But when you look at the Kalam Suttas and things, in certain other teachings, it is also not a silver bullet. At the beginning, you need to have that sort of like asking questions and open to the, you try to be open to a certain idea and ask questions and try to get your head around. There is a certain sense of doubt there. Like a simile would be, I think Ajahn Brahm also gives this simile, of like you are, as a student, you are about to go to a university. So you choose a certain university. Let's say not in a Sri Lankan sort of a situation, which we don't have that much of sort of options in our cases. But let's say in a broader sense, you are, you would like to have a certain career. So you are looking for certain universities. You do your background research, the certain university, certain department, certain lecturers, and the speciality of these people, the speciality of the certain departments. Certain university, the engineering department has this speciality, and the other university, the same engineering department, has a different speciality. So therefore, I see myself in such a sort of situation. Therefore, I choose to be one of them. And so you go there and join them. And having done your research and gained faith in certain a course to follow, and then you start to study. Now, once you commit to that, then comes doubts. Am I following the right path? Is this the career I must have, and things like that? That's not helping, because that that question had to be answered before you start, before you embark such a journey. So once you are clear, once you have done enough research, and then you go and you go and do the thing, and you need to understand the doubt coming later about what you are doing. That is not helpful. That is basically a hindrance. That is vicikiccha, hindrance in action. So even in meditation, the same thing. You assess, you learn Dhamma, you assess a certain teacher. We, in our minds, we give grades for certain teachers. We like a certain teacher. We compare and we see, oh, this teacher is the best among, when you across these factors, let's say. And then you start to listen to the teacher and you start to meditate, and then people start to have doubts later on, because the results are not that quick. And you start to wonder, maybe I should do something else than the anapanasati, anything. So we find ourselves doing all sorts of meditation and still not getting anywhere, because the energy is dissipated and the hindrance is certainly obstructing. It is a hindrance, the vicikiccha. So the 5 hindrances. So Lord Buddha says that without surpassing, without transcending these 5 hindrances, there's no way you are experiencing the superhuman qualities, the Uttarimanasa Dhamma. What are the Uttarimanasa Dhammas? They are the Samadhi, particularly jhanas, and there are these other psychic powers also, of course, but they are not that sort of important. When you look at the suttas, they are like extra things. But most importantly, the Maggaphala, all these, from the Sotapanna to Arahantship. So these things are Uttarimanasa Dhammas, and to get there, you need to go past 5 hindrances. And Lord Buddha says, particularly, as an Arahant, there's no way that someone would have 5 hindrances as an Arahant. It's not a possibility. But these days, every now and then, you might see certain arahants, quote unquote, uh, with 5 hindrances. So, you know what I mean here. They are not quite arahants, but there are these great misunderstandings because these teachings are diluted, the standards were taken sort of further down, so that you know anyone like just to sort of encourage everybody to sort of get there. But we need to understand that it's good that everybody sort of striving for these things, but there has to be a certain standard to all these things. Having shortcuts and all these sort of cutting corners sort of a thing, it may be okay to a certain extent in the worldly sense, but in a spiritual sense, if you are bringing that dynamic into this sort of thing, I mean, I don't have to sort of tell you actually, how that's not going to work in that way. We need to understand that these things are there, like in the original Buddhism, the 5 hindrances are very important to sort of surpass. You need to transcend them, and then you will hit these superhuman qualities. So, regarding these 5 hindrances as obstacles, there is this sutta I thought maybe it's beneficial to read out today. So Lord Buddha talks about. So this is in Savatthi, in the Anathapindika's monastery. Lord Buddha uttered this teaching, and Lord Buddha talks about these. There are these 5 hindrances, and then Lord Buddha talks about what the 5 hindrances mean. Take a mendicant who has feeble and weak wisdom, not having given up these 5 obstacles and hindrances, parasites of the mind that weaken wisdom. It is quite impossible that they would know what's for their own good, the good for another, or the good of both, or that they would realize any superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. Then Lord Buddha gives a simile. Suppose there was a mountain river that flowed swiftly, going far, carrying all before it. But then a man would open channels on both sides of that river, so the mid-river current would be dispersed, displaced, and separated. The river would no longer flow swiftly, going far, carrying all before it. So that's how Lord Buddha explains. With the 5 hindrances, we lose energy, we lose that momentum. It will stop us, on our tracks. So then he goes on and talks about the positive side of it. Having given up, having transcended the 5 hindrances, you maintain that momentum, and then you will go to your destination because you have that momentum. So then I would like to go into some details of these 5 hindrances. Now, in the Anguttara Nikaya, at the book of in the book of Ones, there are like interesting little suttas, like bunch of suttas. You see, Lord Buddha talks about what are the causes and conditions of these 5 hindrances, and what could be a possible antidote for those 5 hindrances. So let me go through these suttas. Bhikkhus, I don't see a single thing that gives rise to sensual desire. the karma chanda. Or when it has arisen, makes it increase and grow like the feature of beauty. Grow like the feature of beauty. So basically, what Lord Buddha says that the karma chanda is 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 arising due to this a certain way of looking at certain things. Now, Lord Buddha says this is as the subha sanya, the subha, actually subha nimitta rather, in the Pali. Now, you see a certain thing, a certain person, and that gives rise to the kama chanda, gives rise to the wanting, the craving, the tanha. And there's a reason behind it, because you pay attention to this certain features of that person or thing, which gives rise to this sense of yearning and sense of subha. And that means the mind sort of inclined towards, the mind is sort of have this wanting of that object. So that is kama chanda. And Lord Buddha says that in the next sutta he says what prevents, gives rise to kama chanda or the sensual desire is that one deliberately pays attention to something not so beautiful in that same thing. Because when you look at people, when you look at things, there are like this, there are many sides to these things. If you pay attention to a certain thing that gives rise to sensual desire, in the same way, if you change the perception, if you pay attention to something else of the same thing, you start to see, look, there are flaws as well. You see, nothing perfect. So why should we do this? Because karma chanda, once it is arisen, it will grow in you more and more. And eventually, these things are, becoming painful, in your heart. The pain, will come with these things. Pain or a certain suffering or, this, sense of emptiness and things like any of it. So you start to wonder, how can I possibly shake this thing off? Because you start to see drawbacks. Then this is the way, at least now you are open to this possibility that I need to do something about it. And this is the way that you deliberately pay attention to a certain unbeautifulness of the same thing. It may be a feature, it may be some sort of a character flaw or anything. So subha nimitta leads to kama chanda. Asubha nimitta, basically, that's the escape from it. Now, here, especially when we say the asubha, it doesn't mean that the sense of the word asubha in Sinhala, which is like it's about the repulsiveness of the body or anything. It is asubha in general. It may be the sense of repulsiveness. It may be some sort of unattractive thing, a way a person behaves, or a certain thing. So that's all. Everything here actually taken as asubha here. Basically, a drawback of something. And then Lord Buddha talks about the hindrance of ill will. I do not see a single thing that gives rise to ill will like the feature of aversion. The feature of aversion. In Pali, it is the patigha nimitta. You look at a certain person, you're familiar with that person. You immediately notice a certain behavior. Oh, there he goes again. There she goes again. Immediately you pick up that a certain a behavior or a thing you don't like. You pay attention to that feature, and immediately it gives rise to this ill will. You know, there we go again. So the patigha nimitta is something we need to be careful. If we keep looking at the same flow of a person, after a while, we don't see any good of that person, because the entire mind is engulfed in this one single problem of that person. It's such a big problem. It's because the mind also, once these things come to your mind, these things grow bigger and bigger because you are focused into that problem. After a while, then you don't see anything else. Like Ajahn Brahm sometimes says that, there is, you have a problem. The problem is so close to you, you don't see anything else. So what he suggests is basically take a step back, and the problem is still there. We are not sort of denying or sort of, not some ignorance is bliss kind of a thing. It is there, but there's a lot more to see also. You gain your perspective. But the patigha nimitta, or at the beginning, it was the feature of beauty, the subha nimitta even. Once the subha nimitta is, growing, it's just, that's it. You are infatuated by that. You don't see any flaws of that person or that thing. You're so obsessed. But if you took a step back, if you gain the perspective, you see, yeah, it is there, but I see the sense of unbeautifulness, unattractiveness, or sense of, in this case, not the patigha nimitta, but the sense of sarva metta. There are like lovable things also, like things you can sort of, because they have certain qualities, you can forgive them for who they are. So you gain perspective by not paying attention to one object, otherwise these things sort of obsess and take hold of your mind. That's the problem. So actively you changing your attention to these things. Hence the term wise attention, right? The yoniso manasikara. Because if you do ayoniso manasikara, things become bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's it. That's what you see. But if you have the yoniso manasikara, you see that, and you see that as well, and you choose what is a suitable object, so that you want to be, you don't want to burn, inside. You don't want to, be in pain. So you choose wisely, the which nimitta you need to choose. So Lord Buddha says here in these suttas that kama chanda, which is the sensual desire, and the ill will, they occur because of this subha nimitta, because of this patigha nimitta, because you attend to these things unwisely, because of ayoniso manasikara of this nimitta, these hindrances occur. But if you did the yoniso manasikara, paying attention to the other aspect of it, then it will cease. So this is something we need to remember. We can actually, realistically derail, at least certain things, if we follow this simple advice. And thirdly, Lord Buddha talks about, I do not see a single thing that gives rise to dullness and drowsiness. That is the mental sluggishness. There is this sense of sluggishness you start to experience. sometimes we do experience this thing. And that gives rise to, that initial sluggishness gives rise to this proper sloth and torpor. Now you don't feel like getting up and doing something, and you are, you feel, sort of gloomy inside. It's a gloomy day. Like, I don't know whether it's going to be a rainy day today, but it's not that bad. But something like that. Some people sort of find it sort of if it is gloomy, I don't feel like it need to be, I wish the sun is out there. So yeah. So we need to understand if there is a sense of gloominess, we need to do something about it. Otherwise, that also grows. And certain gloominess, actually, it doesn't sort of stop at the hindrance level. That gloominess even develops into anxiety, even towards depression or panic attacks and things like that also. So we need to fix this problem sometimes. When you see a certain gloominess, we need to see there is gloominess. See, the sun came up for a moment once again. So, sloth and torpor, understanding the gloominess is important. Otherwise, these things are growing into sloth and torpor. And Lord talks about the antidote to this sloth and torpor. He says that when you are energetic, before that, Prabhupada says, this elements of initiative, elements of persistence, and the elements of vigor. The Pali terms are arambha dhatu. Arambha dhatu means, like in Sinhala, we start moving, get going, get your rear moving, that kind of an energy. Okay, I feel sort of dark and, the gloomy and sort of, like kammeli, but okay, get up, you get yourself moving. That is arambha dhatu. And the next one is the nikkama dhatu. Nikkama is that you are, persisting. Whatever you started, you try to keep the momentum. Nikkama dhatu. And the last one is the parakkama dhatu. Like the parakrama, there are certain sort of, you start moving, and then a hill comes. If a hill comes, what do you do? So you apply more sort of energy just to sort of negotiate that hill. You strive and you put effort, more effort. The parakrama. So arambha dhatu, nikkama dhatu, and the parakrama dhatu is the key to overcome that sluggish mind, Lord Buddha says. So Lord Buddha says that if you are doing your sitting meditation, feel sort of sleepy and sluggish, Lord Buddha says, get up and do walking meditation. One of the benefits of the walking meditation is that it gives rise to energy. And it may be a little bit of doing some yoga or tai chi or, any sort of physical exercises you do sometimes. Changing the situation. Lord Buddha says to Venerable Moggallana, you change your meditation object, change the posture, look at something at a distance, or do some chanting, think about some Dhamma. If all these things doesn't work, have a rest, because sometimes, these things are not purely mental. They are due to physical tiredness and the mental tiredness as well. So if you can't sort of gain the upper hand, Lord Buddha recommends that, you can take a rest as well. That's why Ajahn Brahm says that if you are in a a longer retreat situation, like a couple of, 3-4 days, like 9 days retreats. What he does back in Australia. So he says that take a rest. For the first few days, you are you're making sure that you are having enough sleep, and once you have had that rest, the mind gains that energy, and you will experience less sort of sleepiness, slothatober. So resting also important, even according to this instruction to Venerable Moggallana by the Lord Buddha. And in a more sort of usual situation, or let's say not as intense as you are falling asleep and things like that, then this Arambha Dhatu, Nekama Dhatu, Parakama Dhatu is something you can try. And as the fourth, there is this. So Lord Buddha says that I do not see a single thing that gives rise to restlessness and remorse, that is unsettled mind. So Lord Buddha says that if the mind is not that settled, it gives rise to more ripples, more and more thinking involves. To me, it seems when the Kamachanda and the Vyapada, the first two hindrances, are in action, you lose a lot of energy, and there is a sense of restlessness, in these things, in these two as well. So that basically, that sort of restlessness gives rise to further restlessness, which is covered in this fourth hindrance, which is restlessness and remorse. Lord Buddha says that if you had a little bit of a calmness, it wouldn't, your mind wouldn't get into this sort of a restlessness sort of situation. And we see that the major sort of reason behind restlessness is this lack of contentment. Somehow you're bored, whatever you are doing right now is not good enough, in your mind. Then you start to wander. You start to sort of think about the past, think about, plan about the future, fantasizing, all these things, because whatever in front of your mind, the meditation object, or anything for that matter, we are talking to a person, or you're listening to a person, or anything, that's not good enough. So let's go and find something interesting, because this is not good enough. So if you had that sense of contentment, then it will be easy, it will be relatively easy to settle to a more, at least it will take away a lot of thoughts. There will be some thoughts. It is a relatively a calm thing. We are not talking about like some strong samadhi yet, but once the restlessness is gone, the thoughts are very limited. So contentment is important. So Lord Buddha says that as the antidote in general, if you can maintain, if you had that settled mind, that wouldn't grow into a restlessness. That's what Lord Buddha says here. It's not that informative, I must admit, but I think we need to understand with the broader context, because these 5 hindrances are lined up to a certain, in a certain way, and it has certainly, the Kamachanda and the Vyapada at the beginning, because they are the most sort of important, or most the biggest hindrances we see. And finally, the Vichikicha, the doubt. Lord Buddha says that I do not see the single thing that prevents doubt from arising, which is, actually it's the opposite, so I should read this. I do not see the single thing that gives rise to doubt. That is the irrational application. That is ayona manasikara. So when we are not thinking properly, thinking straight, according to the principles, according to your solid experience, according to the instructions, according to Lord Buddha's instructions, anything appears in your mind can be valid. In your mind, in your mind's eye, it is valid. As a junior monk, I remember when I think about something, of course, okay, it's an idea, and something opposite to that sort of thought might occur just after that, and that also seems like a valid. And I start to wonder actually now what to believe. Like the both things, these things are made by my mind, so they are my thoughts. Therefore it has to be accurate. Although we are not thinking like that, but that's a sense, right? These are my thoughts. So they're my ideas, and I'm never wrong. So, but if you add a little bit of a logic there, if it is, if the two ideas are like opposite to each other, there's no way actually the both has to be valid, right? It has to be one. Correct. One is not that correct. And later on, when you learn about the Yonso Manasikara from the teachers and your own experience, and you realize actually, the only way you can trust your thoughts, if you have to, is that as long as you keep your thoughts in line with the Dhamma is the yardstick. If you think in terms of the Dhamma, then those thoughts are trustworthy, at least for the time being. It is a tricky territory anyway. But we use that a lot at the beginning. And eventually we give up that as well. But we use that a lot. So Yonaso Manasikara is about that. We think in terms of principles. And teachers like Ajahn Brahm would take the meaning of the Yonaso Manasikara even further. He wouldn't say that Yonaso Manasikara always involves in thinking, per se. Like if you are familiar with his original way of putting, the steps in the meditation, he sort of explains in his books like Mindfulness, Bliss and Beyond. He starts with the present moment awareness, and then he talks about the silence, present moment awareness, because you start to see this inner commentary somehow not that accurate. It's just babbling, and it's not helpful either. It is any way you can sort of be without, because it's not that accurate. And we babble in our mind all the time, just like a crazy person. If you pay attention, it's just this debris. Like I used to see it as this, there's this clear sort of like a swept ground in the forest, and it is swept, and you see the present moment, and there comes like some debris fall onto that forest floor, and it is again like cluttered and it's dirty once again. It's like this um, it's just jibber jabber, like just not something very what's the word I'm looking for, this word, like intelligible, or it's not, there's no meaning to these things, this just thoughts. Every time these thoughts come and sort of cover the present moment, it never stops speaking. So Ajahn Brahm says, you sort of give up that sort of inner chatter, and you delight in that silence, and now you are paying attention to the present moment in silence. And it may be you are paying attention to the anapanasati in silence. There's no sort of describing, breathing in, breathing out. You don't have to describe these things. These are names. Despite you give a name, it is there. It holds. It has its original meaning. You don't have to sort of give a meaning and restrict or round up that meaning to some forced sort of word. The reality is as it is. You are watching it without giving any name. So silently you are watching these things. And when you're watching, you make a determination that you are going to contemplate something. A problem bothers you, a certain Dhamma topic you would like to sort of ponder, reflect upon. So after meditation, you sit quiet. Of course, you are quiet physically and you are quiet inside as well. You make a determination. You load the program, so to speak. Bring that to the memory and wait. You are not asking. You are not talking to yourself, and you wait. And things start to, certain things you start to see without any description. Understands, little bit of bits and pieces of understanding start to occur. Now, according to Ajahn Brahm, that is like the purest of the Yoniso Manasikara, without any words. But in the usual sense, we are so used to use the words, the thoughts and the thought processes. So that's how we sort of train ourselves. So we use the thoughts, but in line with the Dhamma. So at least we can rely on those thoughts to a certain extent. So Yoniso Manasikara, if the Ayoniso Manasikara is there, the more doubt arises. Ajahn Chah, teachers like Ajahn Chah says, he felt like crying sometimes. His thinking sometimes made him cry. Because the Ayoniso Manasikara, the mind can think any sort of thing and make you upset and angry and all sorts of things. So instead of this uncontrolled, undisciplined thinking, you Yoniso Manasikara, you stick to principles, you guide your mind according to that, then you'll get a result out of it. It's as if you are following a certain method, like methodically, like a mathematical sort of a method, and you arrive at a certain answer, something like that. So that's about 5 hindrances. There were some other things also I originally planned to talk about, but the subject itself, subject matter is like vast, so I'll stop here. So I hope this will be helpful. So I think I need to mention this one last bit though, because this is something I determined to mention. So 5 hindrances. If you don't know about them, if mindfulness is not that sharp, these are going to be hindrances. Once the mindfulness in place, you are practicing satipatthana, the satipatthana has gained its momentum. You see what's happening in your mind, and the hindrances occur, then you start to notice. Hindrance came now, the karma chan, this attachment, the inclination towards the sensual sort of pleasures that came up, or the ill will came up, or any other hindrance came up, you notice. When it is there in your mind, you notice it is there, and you apply the antidote. And once it is gone, you know actually it is gone. And that is basically your Dhammanupassana in the Satipatthana. In the Dhammanupassana, being aware of your hindrances is part of the Dhammanupassana practice. So once it is contained, once you get your head around, these things become the meditation itself. And once the Dhammanupassana is done, once you understand all around what other obstacles are, they gave way to the jhana, to the Dhamma, the samadhi, and the samadhi will lead to the Yathabhuta Jnana Darsana and so forth. So I wanted to mention that last bit as well. So I hope this is helpful, although I took a little bit more time for this talk today. So I hope you all the best with your practice. May you be able to transcend, may you be able to surpass these 5 hindrances eventually and attain to the superhuman powers. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.